Tried water. It's good for you. It's good and good for you. We are live at 7:15. Just got in from fracking price still all wet here. Fixing our fountain. Got to do a little plumbing stuff. It all worked out good. Today we want to talk about the next low buck truck camshaft. So we have a low buck truck camshaft for the LS. Works great on all these 4.85360s. Adds like 60 horsepower. We have two other cams. We have the slightly milder Ripper cam. That's only 159, so that's a good deal. A lot of guys are getting those. And then the Truck Plus camshaft if you want to make a bit more power. So we're looking at maybe other cams for the LS, but right now, excuse me, that seems to be, we're pretty happy with that. I mean, maybe we could offer a bigger one, but we are a Brian Tooley Racing dealer. So if you guys wanted, if anybody wanted anything like a stage 4 LS3 cam like we've run that made all that power. In fact, Brian did 550 with his heads on a 5.3. So that cam can make a lot of power. We've made a lot more power than that on bigger motors. So if you want a bigger cam, we can get you bigger cams, get BTR stuff. So that's not an issue. The question is, and this will be the poll for today, but you guys can let me know also in the comments if you have other engine families. So the question is going to be basically, what should we, if we're going to do another low buck truck style camshaft, what engine family should we do it for? Don't tell me 2-valve modular Ford or Admiral. Don't tell me an inline 4.9 liter 300-inch 6-cylinder Ford or whatever. It has to be an application where we can obviously sell lots of them. We don't want to sell 2 or 3 cams. We don't want to design and build and produce and store stock camshafts for something that we're going to sell 1 or 2 of. We can't do that. There's no way that our business would be able to do that. So we want something we can sell a lot of. So the poll for today will be okay, for the next low buck truck cam, should we pick Gen 3 HEMI over the Gen 5 LT motor? For the next low buck truck cam, should we pick the Gen 3 HEMI over the Gen 5 LT motor? There are other choices too. And so these are other ones to consider. And you guys can let me know in the comments, because I can't phrase a poll, a yes or no poll in this manner. But let me know what you think. Also, other options would be, I'm partial to small block Fords. So a 5-liter, a camshaft like that. Or the other one I was thinking of is possibly a big block Chevy, the Gen 6 stuff or the 8.1. You could do a cam for both of them, but one or either one of them is going to have an altered firing order. I think maybe actually it'd be easier for to make it for an 8.1 firing order and then have the big block guy change his plug wires. That'd be easy, because a lot of those are going to be carbureted. If it's fuel injected, then you're going to have to deal with that either way. But if it's going to just be a simple carbureted thing, like we run a lot of those, there's going to be way more carbureted Gen 6 454s than there are going to be 8.1. So it's just, or we could do both or whatever, but it's, you would just do a changing firing order. But I don't really want to do 2 cams for that. I would only want to do 1. And if somebody wanted to, whichever one we made it for, the other guy could use it, and then you just have to make a minor change accordingly. It's not really a big deal. But right now we're looking at the HEMIs, and we're looking at the Gen 5 LT motors. The LT motors, obviously, we don't offer anything for that, but we're a Brian Tooley Racing dealer, so we can get you. They have some excellent cams. They have some Truck Norris cams for those that do very well. I would be more interested in, like, our low buck truck cam for the LS. I'd be more interested in something that's not, the major performance thing. I don't care about a, 240 at 50 camshaft or whatever we could fit in there. Obviously, it's a VVT motor. The other question becomes, should it still be VVT if it's an LT motor? And you could ask the same thing about Hemi. When I'm talking about Gen 3 Hemis, I'm honestly thinking about the earlier Gen 3 Hemis before they went to VVT ones. I call those Gen 4s. The Gen 3 stuff is the non-VVT stuff, and the non-dual runner manifold stuff. The non-Apache and the I think Eagle is the other head, right? So those, the early ones, the ones that I see in wrecking yards all the time. That's kind of how I gauge whether or not I would do a camshaft. Are there lots of those in wrecking yards? And so are people likely to get those and swap those into stuff? And yes, on big block Chevys, they're always popular. Hemis also. I think Hemis have gotten a bad rap early on because of the lack of tuning for them and because people blew them up because they didn't know what they were doing. A Hemi's a really good motor. It's got lots of cylinder head flow. It's got a great intake manifold, like an LS, just needs camshaft and kind of away you go. Just if you put ring cap in it and you can tune it properly, we've already shown you can make lots of power with those. So anything that starts out with lots and lots of cylinder head flow is good in my book. It's a good thing to have. That way, we look like a hero. I always look back at a small block Chevy or a small block Ford, a small block Dodge, same thing. If we go back and look at those, we see that we are handicapped by a lot of different things. You take a Magnum, it's not a great intake manifold. This doesn't have a lot of head flow, doesn't have a lot of camshaft. So it's got same thing with small block Ford. Small block Ford, even worse. Like a 5-liter Ford, it has a really restrictive and ultra long runner, low RPM intake manifold, very poor flowing heads. The camshaft was the best thing about it. And it was, it still needs a camshaft. If you're going to make power, you need a camshaft. So you're going to replace that anyway. But, heads that flow 150 or 160 CFM are just not really going to get the job done very well. That, by the way, is the interesting thing. I still get comments on the video that I put up where I'm talking about the Boss 351 and how much I really like that motor because it had lots of cylinder head. Those are good. And then I was not a fan of the Hypo 289 because like the stock 302, it's got junky heads on it. They're just not there. And yes, I know it won, and I'm a huge fan of the FIA Cobra stuff and the Cobra Daytona stuff and Pete Brock and all of that. 280, all of the 289 success. It just had terrible heads. They had to make big adjustments to make those motors make power because those heads are just not very good. So again, anything that has good cylinder heads, the LT motor obviously has lots of cylinder head. Variable cam time makes it even better. They got compression, they got direct injection, they get good intake manifolds. Again, a camshaft they're really good to begin with, but camshaft, again, you can go a long way and make good power. So I'm curious to what you guys, for the next low buck truck cam, should we pick a Gen 3 Hemi over a Gen 5 LT? So more saying no. So that would indicate more leaning toward the LT thing, although we'll have to look and see what we're looking at in terms of the recommendations that are actually in the comments. And the people that are not watching this live, you guys watch this later on, please go ahead and comment and let me know, what do you think? Because for us, this is, it's a chance for me to get on and answer questions, which I love doing, but also a chance for us to get in and ask people, what their opinions are. This is it's like product development, or more apt, like research, marketing research, I guess. But I would like to do that, and since that's a fairly time-consuming thing, developing the lobes and getting everything done, it's a while before to go from we have lobes, we have camshafts, we can do our testing, we can get them into production, we have them in stock, and we can sell them now. That's a long time period for things to happen. But the good news is we do have turbos in stock. We have got the shipments of G42s, which I think is, for my money, the 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower. Very good response. And for 6-liter guys, that's the one that you want to get. and I was going to ask you, in fact, we'll probably ask that on the next live feed, if you think we should maybe do an intermediate turbo between the GTX 3584 and the G42. Lots of 6-liter guys want to put the 3584 on, but since they have cam 6 liters and they, but I want to make, I'd like to get it up near around 700 at the tire, whatever, which is 800 at the flywheel. And on a 6-liter, that turbo is just not going to be as happy at that power level. At 600, it's going to be good and it's going to be really, really responsive. So it's going to be fun for that, but it's not the turbo that you want for 800 horsepower. So do you want something that's going to be for 800 horsepower for a 6-liter? We got some things that we're looking at for that. So let me know if you guys think that would be, if that kind of thing is necessary. Because we can either go bigger and more flow on, 3584 plus kind of thing, or we could go down to a different size turbo that would be an intermediate between those two, because there are ranges there in between there. So let me know. Let's see what you guys got going on. Sergeant, Special Agent, Windstone, 8.1. Both cams, of course. Yeah. I don't know that we have that. LT, Gen 3 Hemi, do the 8.1. They're hardly ever utilized. Talking 550 pounds, 550 foot-pounds of torque under 3,500. Yeah, I did some testing with them. They work good. Gen 5 will probably sell the best. 4.6 and Atlas, AMC 390. Yep, that's other guys. Well, I have my other guy's shirt on, so I would actually expect all of those other guys' comments. Coyote cams, yeah, we'd sell at least 4 of those to one person. Brendan, are you asking if BTR came up with a better all-around cam than a Truck Norris? That'd be hard to beat. And it depends on, again, it works so well for a lot of things. If you want something different than that, then obviously there's a different cam or a better cam. I bet on the LT selling the best. If I ever go away from small block Chevy, my 68 Chevy, I'm going to go straight to an 8.1. Chevy, not Cadillac, although I do want one of those also. Gen 5, LT will sell better. OG small block Chevy, OE roller. Yeah. Is there something for a small block Chevy, even in a hydraulic roller, that has not been made already? K24, J Series, Gen 3, 385, Godzilla. Low buck truck, small buck Chevy cam, Truck Norris for hydraulic. There is, well, there's not going to be a low buck truck, a small buck Chevy cam, but there's lots of like RV style cams, which would be not exact, but comparable. I think a 6373 with a 1.0 would be good for a 5-liter with the blow through and Anderson B31 HR cam. I don't know about the rest of your things that you have. I don't know what your desired power level is. I don't know what heads you have, what intake manifold you have. No, I mean, the turbo would work fine. I don't know what your gearing is. I don't know any of that. We got new ambulances that work. They all have 7.3s. The haul compared to the V10 ambulances, but the V10s are smooth. Is the Hemi more work to change cams? I don't think that the Hemi's more work to change cams than a Gen 5 is. Don't the Hemis like to drop valves? Some of those do. The early ones. I've heard that. I never did that on any of mine, but Hemi has a 4-lane highway into the intake valve. You're going to do some Coyote turbo testing? Yes, we will, because Jimmy has a Coyote, so we're going to run a turbo or turbos on it. I'm not a Hemi guy, but the owners of Hemis are more low buck type guys than Gen 5 LT guys. Also, the 8.1 low buck cam that moves the power band up 500 to 800 RPM would sell really well. I can't remember. We put the, what was it? The ZZ502 or something like that camshaft in it that we ran. And I think that's a low to mid 220s cam, if I remember right. Big block Chevy 454. And I think this, I have it under strokers. There we go. Cam test. Finals. It's easy 502 cam, yeah. It sure needed the ported intake though. Peak power's at 4,800, 4,900. Yeah, 800 would be a lot to move stuff, I think. 46, 54. Yeah, that'd be a lot. I'm not a Hemi guy, but the owners of Hemis are more low buck. Okay. Give the Hemi guys something. Godzilla's awesome, but super niche until Ford pulls their finger out of their not for sitting many more cars. I think that's only going to be a truck motor. Ford 351 400M, lots and vans and trucks. I don't think people realize they're Cleveland-based engines. They flow good. Yeah, a 2V Cleveland's not a great head. It's probably better than a Windsor head. LTs are lifter failing. I don't think that the L83s are. Boss 289. Oh, so you want to put Boss heads on the 289? I mean, isn't a Boss 302 already that good? $400M cams. Basically, a 400M cam is just a Cleveland cam, right? Love to see a modern pattern cam for MC V8s. Wagoneer crowd would definitely buy them. Low buck truck, big buck Chevy cam. Does what have direct injection? The LTs do, but the Hemi doesn't. The truck numbers cam idea, lumpy cam, very few drivability sacrifices has spread through the truck world. A hydraulic roller, small buck Chevy would probably have huge sales. I don't think that there's anybody out there that hasn't that has a small buck Chevy that hasn't already bought an RV cam for it though. I mean, they've been around since since the 50s. More Hemi bros and LT bros. There is more room to grow for a person like you in the Hemi market. The LT stuff is already pretty saturated. Gen 5 LT and without sugar scoop pistons, I think you can make good power with a different combo. The 4.2 Atlas needs something other than factory regrinds. Does direct injection change where you want your cam? Yes, it does. The cam timing for the low buck truck cam for Brian, or I don't have an LT cam. So if you look, I'm sure if you look at camshafts for the LT, like Brian's got LT cams and LS cams, and I'm sure that those are different. In fact, when they're designing LS cams, they make them VVT when they're testing them before they produce them, so that they can swing them. They can make the cam that they think is right, and then they get advanced and retard it and go, oh, it wants to be at this, and it works good. Yes, more turbo options. Good evening, Rich. 2000 ARP rod bolt on HPM rods using stretch. I've never measured stretch, so I don't ever do that. Is it okay to go over the torque spec to get the right stretch? Have to go 15 foot-pounds over max stretch? I don't ever do that. I always go to the torque spec. Do for the LS 6 liter for are you talking about turbos? How do you feel about SRT 6.1 aluminum intake over the stock Eagle head truck intake manifold? I've never compared those two. When I wrote my book on Hemi stuff, this one, they didn't have the late model Hemi truck one. So I don't know which one of those is better. I would suspect that the late model one is better. A T6 turbo, we probably will never offer a T6 turbo. The big laggy ones, no, that's not for us. That's not how we roll. Small block Ford or 429. Garrett recommends a GTX 3584 RS for 2 liter up to 5.5 liters. Yeah, I don't base it on displacement. I also don't base camshafts off of the recommended RPM ranges. I want to see your cool can fuel test. The one that I did with the oil cooler that we put in ice water. Late to the show, but made it. Jackson House. Didn't your last 3rd gen Hemi pop on the dyno? Yeah, the junkyard one that I had got hurt. It got hurt because it got hydrolocked. That was my fault. Those were fittings that I didn't get put into the Edelbrock heads. Can't say I've seen anyone mod a Dodge Ram engine unless it's a Cummins. I'm curious about LT stuff. Just not convinced of HPFP and DI yet. You've not seen anybody modify Gen 3 or the Gen 3 Hemis? 6.2 LS aluminum block stroker build. Is that what you're doing, Scott, or that's what you would like to see? 185 SVE heads with RPM air gap and 750 blow through on a Windsor, 410 gears. Just don't want too much back pressure. Which one of those things are you? Why do you think that the AR is going to determine back pressure? It's not going to. The turbo sizing and the NA power output are going to determine that. You'll adjust that a little bit with AR, but that's not going to be the determining thing. The AR thing is a little thing. The turbo sizing, the impeller size, the hot side, the cold side, but the hot side for back pressure, and then the NA power output and the displacement of the motor that you're putting it on, and then the power output that you're trying to make, and then also RPM. The higher the RPM you run, the greater the back pressure relative to boost pressure will be. I think OE roller small block Chevy cams with a more modern low profile could be a thing. Flipping through catalogs, they all seem old school and aim too low in the RPM. You want to run more RPM with hydraulic roller stuff and on the small block. Hoping there's lots of 6.2s to choose from. Oh, in the wrecking yard. Those ARP rod bolts have a stretch spec of 5 to 6. 70 to 80 foot-pounds. They give you a range of 70 to 80 foot-pounds. That seems like a big spread. Anderson B31 is a turbo cam made for 410 gears and 3,000 stall. My built trans. Yeah, every cam's a turbo cam. So anything from Anderson that you got will work for a turbo. So whatever the camshaft does NA, that's what it'll do when you add a turbo to it. It's not gonna if it makes more low speed power, if the camshaft helps the motor make more low speed power, you'll have better turbo response, regardless of whether you call that a turbo cam or not. If it makes more power up top, then you'll be softer down low. And, if it makes more NA power up top, then you'll be softer down low. Again, regardless of whether you call it a turbo cam. So whatever the thing does NA, the turbo just gets multiplied. And then whether it makes more low speed power or mid-range power or high-end power, whatever the cam is designed for on your combination, that's going to affect what happens with the boost and what happens with the power output. 400 M, 351 cams are the same. Maybe there's a bias of LSGM people here. I wouldn't think a lot of people are junkyard swapping direct injection engines. I don't know how many people. I can tell you that guys that, at least the guys that I've talked to, and people on here and people that leave comments, and from judging by what's going on with the channel, is that I don't ever hear about a lot of guys going and sourcing an L83 or an L86 or an LT1 from the wrecking yard and swapping that. There's thousands and thousands of people doing it with LS motors because it's a lot easier deal. The LS market is still way, way bigger than the LT stuff is. But we're looking to, maybe expand into something else. So the camshaft is designed for 410 gears. I'd like to see that specific of a camshaft. How about the Toyota Tundra V8? Don't know what size it is, but sure can use a cam. Yeah, I agree. But that's a Tundra is going to be an overhead cam deal, right? Or is it a cam and block? I don't know that I've ever even looked at one of those. I just H2B TR cam, a slightly ported head and Trinity intake manifold on an L83 and made 420 wheel horsepower. That's good. It had to be a high RPM thing though with that Trinity intake manifold on there. Tundra's quad cam, be very expensive. Yeah, I'm not interested in doing that. Not for 2Js or RBs or any of that stuff. You sell a bunch of the best turbo cam. Yeah. I think the G4900 1150 would be the ultimate turbo for a 5348 and cam for a street strip. GTX 35 is better for a daily. Yeah, I'm not really designing turbos for racing. Much more for street and street strip guys, but not guys that are they're building track only stuff. Variable cam and intakes are awesome if you have the ability to control them. I agree. The variable cam is cool, but and it's fun being able to tune that because I've done a little bit on the dyno when we've had factory ECUs on there. Like I did it on the Atlas motor and I did it on the L83 and on the Coyote too. And that's cool to see the change in what's happening. Intake manifold the same way. If you've got, normally it's just 2 runner lengths, but when you can do that, that's really cool because then, I have this one. I have this one. Hey, look, I got both of those now. That's kind of awesome. Bolt stretch is the real way to measure, even if it's over the torque spec by a little bit. I didn't vote on the poll because I don't have either of the options. I'm not sure which would be more popular. All right. Is a low buck truck cam too small for a 6-liter? I'm particularly asking about getting decent gains without losing much of any low end torque. What about the Truck Plus for a 6-liter? The low buck truck camshaft still works very well on a 6-liter. Take a look at the videos I have up where we ran it on a 6-liter. I ran that. I also ran the Truck Plus. We also ran each one of those with 2 different intake manifolds. So you have all of the data up on the video to show you with the dyno results to show you what's going on with those. So if you want that, it works very well. It's a big gain over especially an early 6-liter camshaft because that's just an LM7 camshaft, just like the 4.8 and 5.3. So it's going to be 60 horsepower over that. It's going to be a little bit less over the later truck cam, but still a big change. And the crossover is still 5,000 RPM. If you want a Truck Plus and you want to make more power above 5,000 RPM on your 6-liter, then you get that one. If you're more concerned about power below 5,000, you get the low buck truck. A Datsun L series. That would be good. An RB is what I'm thinking. Is the cool can video up? Yeah, the fuel cooling was up. It didn't do anything. It didn't make any power. It didn't change anything. I heard someone imply that blow-through carb setups need more timing than port injection. Is this generally true for a street strip? I don't know why that would be the case. I don't know why the timing would change for that. The timing usually is a function of the chamber design. Dudes do twin turbos on the Ram TRX. Things are supercar fast for the size. Back pressure gives more response. Yes, I agree. And that's the thing. We have for years talked about that because it's like it's things that people talk about when they're talking about turbo stuff for years, since back in the Gale Banks days when he was doing the twin turbo carbureted stuff and all that. Because I have all the books. But turbo lag is a big thing. And then when we got a little bit more sophisticated, Back pressure. Oh, back pressure is an enemy. It's not. Back pressure. That's like saying overlap is your enemy for camshafts. It's not. Oh, you can't have too much overlap. Really? You can't. So if the overlap makes more power, guess what happens when you add boost to that? You start out making more power, and then you make even more power. It's just the same thing with back pressure. If you look at any factory setup, it's going to have back pressure because that's how you get response rate. Those two things go together. So which of those things do you want? Do you want really, really good response? Yes. Okay. Your back pressure is going to be higher than if you wanted less response. But which one of those things do you want? Like I said, 90+% of the guys like a turbo that comes on really fast and gets into party mode right away. They like that way more. If you never looked at the back pressure, you would like that more. When you look at the back pressure, oh, my back pressure is too high. So now I want to change the AR. Okay, now you've changed it a little bit. Put a bigger turbo on it, and then it'll be really laggy. And it could make more power now, but are you happier there? Usually not. You just don't want back pressure after the turbo. I guess Hellcats have problems wiping out cams. Maybe a Hellcat might be as well. Who wakes up and thinks their 5,000-pound truck isn't psychotic enough? The truck nose cam for the LS engine is super popular. It's just a name that's recognized in the truck world. It's a sales gimmick people want to buy for their not LS engine too. No, I agree. That has to be the biggest name in LS camshafts in history. And so they're carrying that over to other things because it has brand recognition. It's a brilliant idea. How about dying into B6 from a Grand National for your next other guys test? I've only ever seen one of those at West Tech, and it was a damaged one, unfortunately. Back pressure on any turbo setup is bad. No. What I would like to see, I'm planning on building one to put a 73 Nova. More RPM and hydraulic on OE style small block. I think LS style RPM, not towing RPM. Yeah, we wouldn't make a camshaft like that. I'm not interested in 8,000 RPM stuff. I missed it. Are you possibly carb swapping a Gen 5 LT? If so, how do you remove all the AFM and HPFP? And how does the long reach spark plugs in the combustion chambers mess with the flame front? No, we're not talking about that. I was talking about a camshaft. But you could run a carburetor on there. Just as easily as you can run port injection on it. You just get rid of the DI stuff. You just plug it. And we've already gotten rid of the AFM stuff on cam swaps. We've done cam swaps on L83s before. I care more about the peaks or the curve than the peak. Can I run a low buck truck or truck plus with a stock to close stock stall converter? You definitely can run a low buck truck with a stock stall converter. And what size motor is this? On a 4.8, maybe. 5.3, definitely. 6 liter, definitely. Truck plus, maybe on a 6 liter, probably not on a 4.8 or 5.3. B31 cam, 6,500 RPM. Anderson said their B31 cam just makes 40 more horsepower. Because of the overlap? Here's the deal with rod bolt stretch. If the bolt doesn't stretch enough, it backs off. Either the nut or the bolt will loosen. Yeah, I know you're using it as tension to hold the bolt in place, just like a lock washer or something. I understand that. Curious of how much the 6.2 aluminum block is capable of with a carburetor and nitrous. Which 6.2, the LT block or the LT block? They've made lots of power with the LT block. That's not going to be your limiting factor. Spun rod bearing and going L86. It's tuning in LAS NALS engine hard. Nope, I want to try, but also don't want a grenade, freshly built engine. If you've never tuned any motor, it's not, I wouldn't recommend learning on a brand new build. I would recommend learning on a motor that's already in there, and then, but doing a lot of schooling before you did that. Do it on one that you don't care about, like a junkyard one. How big physically is a smaller turbo versus a GT45? Trying to package in my C4 Corvette and space is limited. The GTX 3584 is smaller than a GT45. I don't know if I have photos or measurements of them right next to each other. I'd have to look and see. Was the fuel cooling EFI or carb? Mine was EFI. The one that Engine Masters did was carb. For some lag, and then all hell breaks loose and pulls the front wheels off the ground. Best way to get a good back pressure ratio is to mount the sensor in the trash can. Just don't worry about it. It's like oil pressure. I'm surprised there's a cam called Boost Lee. That was one of the ones that were discussed long ago. And there were others too. Over the last few years, I've heard and read about many people having flat tappet cam lifter failures. Is this from modern oil or bad manufacturing or bad materials? I think it's a combination of stuff. I think it started happening when they got rid of the zinc in the oils. I think that was a thing. But I also think that there was some things going on with lifters, the lifter manufacturers, particularly the metallurgy. Apologies for being off topic. There's no more topics, man. You just ask, Sam. Can you disclose the release dates for the upcoming BTR cylinder heads? Just watched him on your show and didn't hear anything. I don't know. I didn't ask him about that. Will stock VVT cams work all right in a non-VVT application? I think I have data on running like a factory L83 or maybe one of the other cams that BTR did when they were testing with the cam locked. It doesn't work nearly as well as it does when you swing it, but it still works as a cam. Big Bang nitrous 462 valve. No, I would do a turbo Big Bang for the 2 valve. What do you think is the most overlooked thing that most people forget to consider when trying to make a complete build? I don't know. I don't know what. I think it might be specific to the engine that you're putting together and then your level of expertise. Boost Springsteen. There you go. Boost Willis. Every cam is a non-VVT cam. What flap tappet hydraulic lifters would you use? We have, the last time I ran flat tappet stuff, we used, I was lucky that West-Tech had a bunch of, or some hydraulic flat tappet stuff. They had some old comp ones. I think that they're 812s, if I remember right. And so they were probably decades old. Any plans to test a smaller cam motion VVT cam in a 4.8? I'm curious to see if utilizing VVT you can gain some low-end torque, or at least not lose any while picking up elsewhere. It would have to be a Gen 4 VVT motor for a 4.8, but I don't have any plans. I didn't even know about that. LL Spool J. There you go. Only picked up the Wrecking Yard 6.2 2007 from an Escalade. Okay, so that's an LS motor. We need Richard and Brule to make some Hemi Brothers content. I don't know that Brule's not really that much of a Hemi guy, though. Richard, did you see my comment about LT testing the other day? I don't know. What was it? Had good luck with Schneider racing lifters. And I think Isky has good stuff. Although I don't remember trying their flat tappet stuff. How far would you push a stock small block piston rod setup with ring gap if your horsepower NA is 400 at the crank. And a street application with boost. Trying to think how far we've gone. I know we've got a 700 or 800 with blower stuff on them. I don't remember turbo stuff with stock bottom ends. Flat cams have been a problem for decades. It's not just a ZDP problem. How many problems we had in Cup? They go flat even with break-in springs and 1.2 to 1 rockers. Yeah, but you guys are using gigantic cams in that. Yeah, Stevie B is a big block guy. Although he's tested lots of stuff. And around with the cold air intake on my 67 Shelby. 67 Shelby style hood on my 66 Mustang. Okay, good. That's even better. I like the 66 better. But a cold air hood scoop is a good idea. If I isolate the filter from under hood temps, how much temp differential do I need to make it worthwhile? You just want to get ambient air to the motor. So however you can do that, it's good. Here's me talking about how Holly Dominator has finally added support in the software to run DI alongside a set of port injectors. Yeah, I remember commenting on that. Iski still has an excellent flat tappet lifter for hydraulics and solids. Planning to use the thermal probes for my smoker to measure the delta. Okay. I want to see an LT motor tested with DI alongside port injection just to see if there's power to be had there versus either. Well, Brian did a test on port injection versus DI, and the DI made more power. I don't know that I don't know that they got to combining them. Maybe they did when they were trying to push the higher horsepower stuff. Yeah, Brule, definitely the carb whisperer. And now he's doing lots of cool stuff. Horsepower per dollar, LS or Coyote, or I've got roasted for saying LS. You can't put together a Coyote and make the power that you can with an LS for the same amount of money. A Coyote motor still at the wrecking yard is way, I mean, it depends on what you're starting with, obviously, but if you're not starting with anything, an LS is hundreds of dollars and a Coyote is thousands of dollars. So it's a big difference in power. I mean, a big difference in price. Any chance you're selling your 7-inch crank blower plate from what? Any attempt to cool the intake air is good. Elgin E1136 looks good. The lift requires machining, though, which is the big downside of Gen 1 heads. Who makes the lifters for Iski? The most reliable blend we use were Johnson. You didn't comment on that. Have you ever thought about doing how-to vids? You mean like the what are the ones that we did? How to measure push rod length and stuff? Measuring blow by is keeping it under 3 CFM. The rule of thumb, I know 5 to 7 CFM is a tired engine. I've never done that. Westech had a blow-by machine, and I only ever remember seeing it used one time. I never even cared about it. Ryan Mitchell dominated War in the Woods with his compressed air supercharging powered KC Max. Very cool. Coyote cams are more than the LS is. Yeah, most of those guys don't do that, though. They just add boost. Richard Jeff at 2 Hacks Garage used the new CompCam DLC hydraulic lifters and 2 engines he built recently. A 292 built from a 283 and his vintage rail dragster 302 311 from a 283. Cool. The DLC is nice stuff. Also in the software, at least appears you can run Coyote TI VCT module alongside direct injection module. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to convert a Gen 3 Coyote to Gen 2 timing. I don't understand why would you do that? I tested dual port Coyote. What do you mean, multiple injectors? Beyond 4-inch stroke, stock block LS engines, aftermarket blocks, enter the chat. At what point does a 502, 540 big block start to make sense with money spent? Well, how much power are you trying to make, and why are you trying to do it with a lot of displacement? Jeff used ISKI hydraulic off-the-shelf cams in both engines. The comp cams, DLC lifters work. No flat cam loads. Cool. Boosted Mini Coopers are very sensitive to oil formulas. They do not like conventional oil. The modular Ford stuff seemed to be sensitive about the viscosity. Seen a video where you're trying to get more boost from a 671 on a small block, I believe. Oh, the lower crank pulley that we were running on that small, it wasn't a 671 though. The one that we ran the 7-inch pulley on was the small blower. Factory Coyote cams are roughly the equivalent to a typical Gen 3 LS stage 2.5 cam. L83 truck Norris with an LT2 intake. I vote towards Ford low dollar cams. Would be nice to have some not made in China though. Iskies are made by Johnson. Yeah, that's not surprising. Coyote VCT module on the Dominator won't run a Gen 3 Coyote timing, but the Gen 3 does have direct injection from the factory. They've run Gen 3 Coyotes at Westech, and I thought that they did it with Holly. Can I pair stronger springs for a low buck truck cam like 660? You can, but you shouldn't. I mean, it'll physically run, but it's harder on everything. And the spring is much less effective because it has 110 thousandths more spring that it needs. And so it's really, really far away from coil bind. Can I email you for a non-cam issue? Yeah, Tim, just if I can answer a question, I will. He ran both engines after break-in to 7,000. Had me crack 7,500 in the dragster. It didn't fail. Nice. Direct plus port is cool and should make more power than either direct or port alone. Who's the next guest? LNR, Steve, Chad. Oh, we already had Chad. Coyote ghost cams, those are just locking the cams out at idle. Dan from DD Speed Shop was lossing after that 7-inch pulley, apparently. They're hard to find. I don't remember what that pulley was. Gen 3 Coyote has port and direct both, and the old way to run it on the Holly was to put Gen 2 timing in it and convert to port only with bigger injectors. I like this style of podcast. Yeah, I'll have to ask. Mark Gerhardt ran Gen 3 Coyotes there, and I thought that they ran them direct injected. Nitro blending test. Yeah, nitromethane would be good. I'd like to do methanol too, and E85, and some kind of gas, race gas versus pump gas, so it could show people that race gas doesn't lose power, it doesn't gain power, it just makes the same power on a naturally aspirated motor. How close can you get to coil bind? I think that normally they want it near 30 thousandths. Maybe even a little tighter than that. Nitro carb, yeah, that's probably not going to go that route. Near. Live. They are affordable. The comp cams DLC face lifters, a set of 16 is $130. Is that for flat tablet lifters? That seems really, really low for coated lifters. I thought that the DLC coating would be more by itself, would be more than that. What's the horsepower limit of 50-pound injectors? They'll support 800 horsepower on an NA motor. 91 be the limiting factor? Yeah, because I don't know if are you trying to run boost? They'll support 800 NA, less if it's boosted. The math is take the injector flow rate, multiply it by 16, and you get the power output for a V8. Then multiply that number by 0.85, and then you get what that injector will support under boost. Then, or take that same, like if we have a 50-pound injector, it's 800 horsepower, multiply that by 0.75, and you get roughly what it will make on the 85. A week and a half into welding new floorboards in the bus. Must take me longer than most people do to do this kind of stuff. What clearance is necessary within the valve spring pocket when using valve spring cups? Getting conflicted 20 to 100 thousandths. Also, clearance at retainer on a dual spring. Okay to be 3 to 10. Most of the time, dual springs are touching. And are you talking about, is it an ID locator for the spring? Is it an OD locator for the spring? Crazy idea. Use short traveled, and also Ping. The other thing you're going to run into is that the power number that you see on a dyno. So if I tell you that, let's say that those 50-pound injectors times 0.875, and the 3/4 of that is 200. Okay, so let's say that they'll support 600 horsepower. You're not going to make they won't support 600 horsepower at the flywheel on a supercharged application. And the reason that they won't do that is because if you try to see 600 at the flywheel on the engine dyno using those injectors under boost on E85, the motor, if it shows 600, it's actually probably making 700. It's just 100 of that is used to drive the blower. So you're not looking at a 600 horsepower motor. You're looking at it's not going to be that much, but you're looking at a 700 horsepower motor because it takes a bunch to drive that blower. Use short travel cylinder deactivation lifters alongside a monster of a cam for VVL. Just the foot base of the lifters or DLC code, not the entire body. No, I wouldn't expect the entire body. I would just the contact face where it loads onto the cam. Is the 0.75 multiplied for 85 for boosted E85 or NA? It's for boost. Because you already have the multiplier for you already have the multiplier for boost, but now you're doing it for E85. How much do you think a head bolt will move after being torqued and then come back an hour later, same torque setting, and tighten mark bolt and the head first? I don't know. Do you have that answer for us? Is that why you're asking? How much boost can a stock 4.8 bottom end handle in short bursts? I'm going to be in my rock buggy, so no racing, just short bursts. Is 20 pounds okay? Do you know how much power 20 pounds is? So that this isn't the power question. We've made 1,200. I mean, you could make 1,500 with a 4.8 if you did it right on the stock bottom end, as long as you had ring gap in it. And if you're going to run 20 pounds, you're going to need ring gap in it. And the tune thing is going to be the critical thing. Just try 7 pounds and then 10 pounds and then 15 pounds. And don't just set it on 20 pounds and go out and try to run it, because you'll definitely break it. The cups can fit the springs tight and they'll work fine. You don't want them bouncing around. Nope. You don't want to give them the wiggle room. Do oversized injectors make it harder to idle smoothly? Figure I'd just load them up. A 1,000-pound or 100-pound injector will idle fine. So will 80s. That's easy to tune. That's not a problem at all. I don't know, Sergeant. I've never done that test. I don't have any idea, and I would have never have thought to have marked it because I wouldn't have cared about that. I didn't on none of the big bang motors and on none of the turbo motors that I built have I ever gone and retorqued the head. Not on any of them. Not on any of the big bang motors. Adam, how is a 703 703 retainer and the idea 700? Yeah, that won't work. You don't want an interference fit. Using a gas wideband with the 85, what number do you want? For an NA motor or a boosted motor? It's okay if the springs don't turn freely on the retainer. The retainer can be tight. That's fine. It shouldn't be a press fit, but we've run them where they click into the spring. So if they're both 700, that on your case that would be fine. And I wouldn't measure it by doing a mic either. I would push the retainer onto the spring to see if it goes in. We used to retorque heads back in the 1900s. It rarely took more torque than when you used quality parts. Yeah, I just have never done that. If your bolt gets loose after sitting for an hour, you have problems. I think he's just thinking that the bolt will spin farther because it had stretched or something. You can run 20 PSI on a stock bottom end 4.8 with gap. Why do people go forged rods and pistons just to run 600, 700? They don't need to. If you look at all the big bang motors, we've run 1,500 with stock bottom end stuff. So as long as the tune is right, you can get away with a lot. I have a question trying to figure out if I can put PI heads from my Mustang on my non-PI Vic. It's a 2000. Yes, you can, but you also got to change other things too. You're gonna have to change the intake manifold as well. Well, Stoic would be 14.7 for gas. And then we run NA stuff at 12.8, and then we run boosted stuff at between 11 and 11.5. You don't want it to move around a lot on the bottom either. It should be snug, even at the bottom. Whether you're locating it in the center, like an ID locator or an OD locator. PI heads and non-PI heads swap over fine with factory cams. Does a Prestige I know that they have different springs in them because one of them is a 550 lift cam, one's a 500 lift cam. Does a non-PI head have more spring rate, or are they set up? Do they have a different installed height? Can't remember. It's been a long time since I ran that stuff. Delete-ski. Just need to be careful running a high lift PI cam and a non-PI bottom end. Well, why is that? Why would the lift make a difference? Didn't they change the duration then? Change the cam timing? We've got 2 more minutes for the next low buck truck camshaft. Should we pick Gen 3 Hemi over the Gen 5? 51, 52, 48, 51, 49. It's bouncing back and forth, so pretty split. Can a gas wideband? What is a gas wideband? Tell me what the definition of that is. The reason I ask is my power stroke will hit 16 pounds. But you're talking about your diesel, though? The diesel is a different thing than your 4.8. Copper top. Yeah, there's lots of 454 Gen 6 stuff up there. That 276 cam I use a lot. You can also use a smaller one than that, but it works really good. Even that 276 cam, which is like 224 or something like that, it actually works really well and makes a bunch more torque and a bunch more power because that motor is pretty big, so it can get away with a good size cam. Just referencing throttle to boost range. Yeah, but you can't compare a 4.8 to a diesel because the diesel has no throttle body on it. And you can't compare the way that turbo works on something that's throttled by the fuel. O2 sensors measure oxygen. It doesn't matter what your fuel you're running. Lambda is 1. Yep. Ours just converts it to the gas scale. I didn't know if he's asking about running factory O2 sensors or what. I didn't know what he's trying to get at. It can read it out in Lambda, and maybe some tuners like to read it out in that, and so that they just go, okay, when I'm doing gas, it's this number, and when I'm doing 85, it's this number. I like reading it on the gas scale because I know that it's always the same number. If I want it to be 11.5 to 1, I want it to be 11.5 to 1. It does the conversion for me. Any tips on how to spot a good tuner? I don't know how to do that because the ones that are going to tell you that everyone's going to tell you how great they are. Joe Simpson just made a video about finding a tuner. Not familiar. But on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys all tomorrow.